My name is Jones. I left Cornwall Navy just over 20 years ago, took a year out and went to Cranfield and studied for an MBA. And at that point I decided I wanted to start my own business. And with Tracy, who's my wife there, we started a business called Acuigen, and we're still running that business today. We provide customer feedback services to organisations who want to do it on what we might call an industrial scale, and it goes beyond an Excel spreadsheet. And what I'll do is I'll just talk you through the journey I've been on, and then I'll talk through some of the things I've jotted down which I think are important, which are not dissimilar to what's just been said. When I left Cranfield, I think we wrote a business plan together. I probably walked around 15 different banks and tried to convince a bank manager that I could borrow some money so that we had the facility to start the business. And that was quite scary. And comparing that to today, it's almost impossible to get any money off the bank at the moment. We're a regular customer of our bank, and they're continuously trying to reduce our facility. It's not an easy thing, so don't rely upon banks. And certainly 20 years ago when there was a recession, it was very tough. I would say it's the best time to start a business now if you're that way inclined, because if you can get it to work now, it will only get easier. And what we're spotting in the business we're at the moment is that what the economy is just turning. It's been really, really flat for about two to 3 years. You can see it happening, but the amount of orders that we're getting, people phoning up now, is just changing. So it's a great time to start a business. When I started the business, we started providing customer feedback services to BMW dealerships. And after that, we started working for some business links. And then I was very fortuitous, and we got an appointment by Dell Computers. For about 10 years, we provided customer feedback services for Dell across Europe. And that led us into other IT companies. And for example, Oki is a Japanese company. If you register a product which you purchase from Oki today, anywhere between Russia, Pakistan, Africa or Europe, you will actually route via our servers to register your product to get the benefit of warranties. Or if you buy a Samsung printer, you'll route via our servers to register your product and get your cash back and so forth. And we have done a lot of work for government in the past. What I'd like to do, if I may, I'd just like to share with you a few things which might sound a bit obvious, but hopefully will give you a little bit of confidence when you're starting out. I think the very first thing is to understand what you're going to sell. And when you know what you're going to sell, whatever it happens to be, and everybody's a natural salesperson to some extent. You sell ideas to your children, you sell ideas to your partner, and so on. You're going to be selling something. The hardest thing to do is to identify the name of the person you're going to sell your first product to or service to. And if you can name that person, you can work out how to get to them. And then when you've done the first deal, which is always the hardest, you can then start to replicate it. And you then have to understand why people want to buy your service. And then you find more people like that, and you go out and do it. And it can often be very scary, the idea of starting a business. But actually, if that's all you do, you're away. Now, when you get that first sale, you then have to understand why you're different. And if you can understand why you're different, you can understand why more people will come to you, because you can explain that to people when you're selling. And in my particular case, we're in the B2B market rather than the B2C market. It's quite important to understand that when you're starting a business. Are you in the B2C market or in the B2B market? It's a very different type of sale. The way that you communicate to the market, for example, is very different. And when you're starting a business, it's really important to know 3 numbers. You need to know what your survival budget is. That's the amount of money which needs to come out of your business to keep you going. So, for example, what is the minimum amount of money which you need to pay your mortgage, to pay the essential policies and food and that sort of thing? That's the survival budget. The next number is your budget which you can exist reasonably comfortably and then you have a target figure which you're aiming for. If you know your survival budget, everything else follows. It took us, when we started the business, about 15 months to get beyond the point of Death Valley. Death Valley is when you start, you get money coming in, but more goes out. So that's that. The rest of the things I've noted down here are all about people and team building and so forth. I'd be very, very cautious of seeking the opinion of very close family when you're starting a business, and just been mentioned. If you ask your mother if she loves you, what she's going to say. If you ask somebody you're working with if they get paid enough, what do they say? You can prejudge the answer. If you ask a friend or a close member of the family whether you should start a business and you're enthusiastic about it, what are they going to say? They're going to support you. And often you don't get objective opinions. So I'd say, be aware of that. Speak to somebody who's impartial, somebody who doesn't know you personally, and doesn't have a personal interest in you, in your well-being, and they'll probably give you some more objective advice. Another thing I've noted down here is, which is similar to what has just been said. When you're starting, people often say start in partnership with somebody and so forth. And I have come across quite a few people who started businesses over the years where they've had a 50-50 investment, and then they get to gridlock if they have disagreement. So never start 50-50. If you did 51-49%, you've got movement if you get to gridlock. The next thing is, I say show your vision. It's very easy when you start a business to get going and do things. The hardest thing is to keep the vision going and to keep everybody motivated. So be clear where you're going. I've made a note here about service personnel. One of the biggest things I noticed when I left the military was the difference between employing people who had not been in the military. And for people who've been in the military, it's difficult to understand. But people who've been in the military have had so much training. They are trained and trained and trained and trained endlessly. And so ex-military people, generally speaking, are very, very capable. So if you say, can you do? They probably say yes. If you employ people who've not had that thoroughbred training, very often you can get to a situation where they're academically gifted, or they've got good pedigree, but they haven't got the skill set. So I'd say if you can find a good military person to work for you, that I'd certainly recommend. A couple of things on employing people. It can be a nightmare. The biggest problem is that when you start employing people, you employ them for a job role and so forth. But after a while, the goalposts change. And although situations change, I'll give you a very good example. A lady we employed had a baby. She was massively enthusiastic before having the baby, came back, had to come back to work, having had the baby, but her priorities had changed. We were going in one direction. She had different priorities after she came back. And that's only natural, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But the important thing I'd say is be clear about what you're trying to do, and make sure that when you employ people, you've got lots of policies in place to cover what you're doing. And basically, it's not difficult to do. You just buy a CD and you publish it. So when you have these challenging things when you're employing people, you revert to the policy, and away you go. And my final point is when you're employing people, the most important thing to do is really to employ for their attitude and the way that they'll work as a member of your team. Because you can train the skills, but you can't train the